Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President of the Thalassaemia International Federation, distinguished guests, members of the faculty, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a real privilege for me on behalf of the organizers, the Thalassaemia International Federation, to welcome you all to Thessaloniki to the 14th Scientific and the 16th Patients' Parents Joint International Conferences. I am Androula Eleftheriou, Scientific Coordinator of TIF since 1994 and the Executive Director since 2006. Opening the program of this ceremony, many and diverse, but all incredible, unforgettable memories come to my mind since I joined this global thalassemia community. The experience I had has been unique, and as unique and very special have been the people I met throughout the years, and who each one of them and all together had a real impact in my life. Having lived since 1994 the history of the work and contribution of this federation, the contribution to the global community of patients, parents, healthcare professionals, and decision makers at the national, regional, and international level, allow me to stand today before you feeling truly very blessed and honored to have worked with and for this federation, and with all the members of the board, past and current, who have truly taught me the challenges, but more importantly, the value and beauty of voluntarism. I am therefore extremely honored to introduce to you the co-master of the ceremony, Mr. Kostas Papageorgiou, President of Pan-Hellenic Association for the Protection of Thalassemia Patients, a founding member and a past president of TIF, a parent above all, who has lost a daughter with thalassemia, but has never lost his determination, nor jeopardized his life mission towards a better future for patients with thalassemia in Greece and across the world. Costa.
Distinguished guests, I have to call the first presenter of the President of the Board of Directors of TIF, who really requires no introduction. Having served for nearly 50 years, half a century, and despite losing his only son in 1993, Mr. Panos Englesos never stopped fighting with the same passion and the same undivided commitment, has contributed since its establishment in 1986 to lead the Federation, focusing its work and its mission to improving policies all over the world, at the country level and at the level of the World Health Organization, for better health, quality of life, and patient-centered healthcare system. Please, Mr. Panos Englesos.
Welcome, Mr. Panos Englesos.
Your Excellency, Minister of Health, Excellencies, distinguished guests, thalassemics, welcome to the joint 14th International Conference on Thalassemia and other hemoglobinopathies for healthcare professionals and the 16th TIF Conference for patients and parents. This year, we are delighted to have organized this conference in the historical and culturally vibrant city of Thessaloniki in collaboration with the Greek Thalassaemia Federation, counting the invaluable support of both the Greek Thalassaemia Association and the Hellenic Society of Hematology, and the participation of the Hellenic Center for Disease Control and Prevention. We feel extremely privileged to have set this conference under the auspices of the Greek Ministry of Health and the Minister of Health, Mr. Andreas Xanthos, and to have received the precious support of the Honorable Mayor of Thessaloniki, Mr. Yannis Boudaris. Greece has played an integral role in the history of thalassemia, and was almost the founding, and is also amongst the founding countries of TIF. The dynamic Greek patient community on the one hand and the dedicated medical community on the other have both contributed immensely to the achievement of a better understanding of the pathophysiology, the complex of clinical outcomes of the genetic defect, and subsequently a better understanding of the elements that are essential for the effective control and management of thalassemia. Many Greek names are pioneer figures in the scientific and medical literature and have certainly added knowledge and expertise to the group of colleagues from Italy, Cyprus, the UK, and the USA, who led the work of WHO in those years of darkness and poor knowledge on the matter. Indeed, TIF has made a measurable impact in the history of thalassemia, its prevention, care, management, and research, with the contribution of its international advisory panel, who have thought through the years and which sincere passion and undivided commitment support TIF's work from the very beginning of its establishment, particularly in the context of its internationally renowned educational program. As part of the educational program, this event congregates more than 100,000 key actors in the field of thalassemia and other hemoglobinopathies, comprising healthcare professionals across medical and scientific specializations, patient parents, and industry representatives from over 54 countries of the world. This year's participation requests for an international patient community have come to en masse, exceeding our expectations. We believe that this interest demonstrates the impact that TIF has had globally. We value this vast interest in the best reward of the work, but we also consider it a reminder of the even greater responsibility that lies on our shoulders, the responsibility to stay firm to our mission, to advocate to the implementation of policies that will safeguard and ensure a better quality of life for every patient in every country of the world, policies that will terminate any violation of their human rights. TIF is greatly indebted to distinguished Greek collaborators and advisors. Allow me to thank each and every one of you separately and together for honoring with your presence and express our deepest appreciation to the entire faculty for their unwavering dedication and invaluable contribution. Allow me to deeply thank the patient parent community for their immense interest to participate in this conference and for keeping alive the hope and the optimism of a better future despite their difficult and challenging everyday struggle for survival and quality of life. TIF is moving ahead with new targets, new tools, but always remains firm to its mission to continue supporting patients across geographical borders in accumulating knowledge, building unity and capacities as we strive towards the final goal of achieving established equal access to quality health and other care for every patient, wherever she or he may live, and always recognizing that this is only achievable through the establishment of nationally coordinated and nationally supported programs that will ensure sustainability for thalassemia control and management. Thalassemia today has entered a new era, which introduces brighter horizons for the patients and strongholds for new treatment and cure. These advances are very well reflected in the thematic areas that will be covered on this joint conference. We hope that the program will indeed meet the highest of your expectations. And as always, we count on your help and suggestions aiming to improve even further. This educational event, taking place in this historical moment in time, marked by impressive and dramatic advances in the field of thalassemia and healthcare reforms globally, will serve as a true stepping stone for everyone to join build a brighter future for patients with hemoglobinopathies worldwide. Our pledge to you is that TIF will continue to safeguard the active participation and meaningful involvement of the patient's perspective in all reforms and advances that are taking place, and will continue to ensure that the patient's voice is truly heard and fully respected. At this point, we would like to express our deepest appreciation to those without the help and support of which these conferences would have not materialized. I am, of course, referring to our industry partners. In particular, on behalf of this board, would like to thank our platinum sponsor, Novartis, our gold sponsor, Celgene, Acceleration Pharma, and our silver sponsor, Cirrus. Could representatives of these industry partners please come to the stage to receive a small token of appreciation? Ending, allow me to extend my warmest wishes to a most productive and equally enjoyable stay in the city of Thessaloniki, the bridge of the Thermaikos Gulf. Representatives of the funds, please. Okay, the representatives will deal with that later. Thank you.
Thank you. In the interest of time, the certificates will be given later, but I have now the pleasure and honor to call upon His Excellency the Minister of Health, Mr. Andreas Xanthos, who granted the Ministry of Health its auspices, and who, despite his heavy workload, is here with us. His very presence constitutes indeed the best reflection and proof of the government's recognition in regards to the importance of safeguarding and strengthening the policies for better health and quality of life of patients with hemoglobin disorders in Greece. Κύριε Υπουργέ, βεβαίως. Θα έχουμε την ωραία ελληνική γλώσσα να την ακούσουμε.
Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για την πρόσκληση και για τη φιλοξενία από την πλευρά της Ελληνικής Ομοσπονδίας Θαλασσαιμίας για αυτό το πολύ σημαντικό επιστημονικό συνέδριο, το οποίο θεωρώ ότι περιποιεί τιμή και για τη χώρα μας και για τον επιστημονικό της κόσμο και φυσικά για τους διοργανωτές που έχει επιλεγεί η Θεσσαλονίκη να διοργανώσει και να φιλοξενήσει ένα τόσο σημαντικό διεθνές συνέδριο, ειδικά αυτή την περίοδο της κρίσης και της δυσκολίας που υπάρχει στη χώρα μας και στην κοινωνία μας. Προσωπικά το εκλαμβάνω και ως μια κίνηση αξιοπιστίας, εμπιστοσύνης και αλληλεγγύης προς τη χώρα και τους ανθρώπους της, που εδώ και πάρα πολλά χρόνια κάνουν μια πολύ μεγάλη και σημαντική και σκληρή προσπάθεια να ξαναστήσουν την οικονομία, την κοινωνία και τη χώρα στα πόδια της και να διεκδικήσουν με αξιοπρέπεια και με ισοτιμία το ρόλο που τους αρμόζει μέσα στην Ευρώπη. Είμαστε σε μια περίοδο παρατηνόμενης δυσκολίας και το ξέρουν πολύ καλά αυτό οι Έλληνες πολίτες. Αλλά θεωρώ ότι είμαστε ταυτόχρονα και σε μια περίοδο που αρχίζουμε να επουλώνουμε σιγά σιγά τις πληγές που δέχτηκε το σύστημα υγείας και οι άνθρωποι του στη διάρκεια της κρίσης. Οι ασθενείς με θαλασσαιμία και δρεπανοκυταρική νόσο είναι μια ευαίσθητη ομάδα, πληθυσμιακή ομάδα, η οποία έχει ειδικές ανάγκες, ειδικά προβλήματα και προφανώς χρειάζεται ειδική μέριμνα από την πλευρά της πολιτείας. Αυτό προσπαθούμε με αργό ίσως, αλλά με σταθερό και μεθοδικό τρόπο να προωθήσουμε αυτή την περίοδο. Θέλουμε να ενισχύσουμε με παρεμβάσεις της πολιτείας και του Υπουργείου το αίσθημα ασφάλειας των ασθενών και απέναντι στην ανάγκη εξειδικευμένης και συστηματικής φροντίδας μέσα από τις μονάδες μεσογειακής ανεμίας και τα ειδικά κέντρα, τις ειδικές κλινικές, τα ειδικά εξωτερικά ιατρεία, τα οποία πρέπει να λειτουργούν, είτε αυτά παρέχουν υπηρεσίες και φροντίδα που έχει σχέση με το ύπαρ, με την καρδιά, με το νεφρό κλπ. Πρέπει να αισθάνονται ασφαλείς οι ασθενείς όσον αφορά την πρόσβασή τους, την εγγυημένη πρόσβασή τους στις σύγχρονες, αποτελεσματικές και ακριβές θεραπείες προφανώς και στις νέες εξελίξεις της επιστήμης και της τεχνολογίας, και αυτό γίνεται μια πολύ συστηματική προσπάθεια στη χώρα μας μέσα από μια συστηματική διαπραγμάτευση βιώσιμων τιμών αποζημίωσης μέσω του ΕΟΠΗ να το πετύχουμε. Και το τρίτο πεδίο, πολύ σημαντικό, είναι να υπάρχει μια ασφάλεια όσον αφορά την επάρκεια και την ποιότητα του αίματος με το οποίο μεταγγίζονται. Και εδώ επίσης θέλω να πω ότι το Εθνικό Κέντρο Αιμοδοσίας, με την προσπάθεια που κάνει αναδιοργάνωση και εξυγχρονισμού όλου του συστήματος αιμοδοσίας της χώρας, θεωρώ ότι έχει τη δυνατότητα να διασφαλίσει με την ενίσχυση της μη αμοιβόμενης και θεωρητικής αιμοδοσίας και με τους κεντρικούς ελέγχους, τους μοριακούς και τους ορολογικούς ελέγχους του αίματος, να διασφαλίσει και την επάρκεια και την ποιότητα και την ασφάλεια των μεταγγίσεων. Θεωρώ ότι αυτές είναι πολύ κρίσιμες προτεραιότητες και φυσικά υπάρχουν και πάρα πολλά θέματα και ανάγκες που πρέπει να ενταχθούν σε ένα συνολικό σχέδιο στήριξης και αναβάθμισης του δημόσιου συστήματος υγείας, το οποίο είναι σε εξέλιξη αυτή την περίοδο. Πιστεύω λοιπόν ότι επειδή όλοι καταλαβαίνουμε την ανάγκη να ενισχυθεί το Εθνικό Σύστημα Υγείας, να δοθεί μεγαλύτερη έμφαση στην ανθρωποκεντρική φροντίδα, στη φροντίδα που είναι εστιασμένη στον ασθενή και στις ανάγκες του, να δοθεί η έμφαση που χρειάζεται στην πρόληψη και στην αγωγή υγείας, να δοθεί έμφαση στην πρωτοβάθμια φροντίδα υγείας και φυσικά να συνεχιστεί η στήριξη, η αναβάθμιση της δευτεροβάθμιας και τριτοβάθμιας νοσοκομειακής περίθαλψης. Πιστεύω ότι σε κλίμα καλής συνεργασίας και με τους υγειονομικούς αλλά και με τους φορείς των ασθενών και φυσικά με την ισχυρή πολιτική δέσμευση της πολιτείας, θεωρώ ότι πραγματικά μπορούμε να καταφέρουμε να ανταποκριθούμε με επάρκεια και με αξιοπρέπεια σε αυτές τις ανάγκες. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για την πρόσκληση. Εύχομαι καλή επιτυχία στο συνέδριο και καλή δύναμη σε όλους σας.
Just for the non-Greek speakers, His Excellency the Minister underscored the great strike that happened on account of the economic austerity on the infrastructure of the healthcare system, but he underscored the political commitment not to jeopardize the public health services and the quality of the services provided to chronic patients, including with thalassemia. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister.
Just one small remark for the Minister. Thank you very much for being here today, and we hope that we don't see you in ceremonies. We want you to be with us in the hard days which will come, and you should know that thalassemia patients are different than any other persons. They are independent, they have families, they are working. So we don't want to go back and be second-class civilians. Now, it has been indeed an honor to have collaborated with the Hellenic Society of Hematology for the organization of these two joint conferences, to whom we are greatly indebted for providing to the conference their prestigious collaboration slides. I have the pleasure and honor to call upon the Society's General Secretary, Dr. Ioannis Batsis, to address the opening ceremony. Mr. Batsis, please.
Dear participants, dear friends, it's my pleasure and honor to be with you today, both as a hematologist and the General Secretary of the Hellenic Society of Hematology. Over the last decades, the life expectancy of patients with thalassemia has significantly improved by strict adherence to blood transfusion and chelation. However, the severe compromise of their quality of life by chronic treatment usually triggers treatment non-compliance, resulting in morbidity and mortality, as well as huge human and financial costs. Importantly also, even today in developing countries, patients with limited access to supportive treatment experience the devastating complication of iron overload and chronic hemolysis and die early in life. Until recently, the only curative option for hemoglobin disorders has been allogeneic hematopoietic cell transplantation, with a limitation, however, of donor availability and the transplant-associated immunological risks. Nowadays, an exciting new era for hemoglobinopathies has arisen, and more than one curative options for thalassemia are being offered. Gene therapy has recently provided exciting results in phase 2 and 3 clinical trials, and patients with beta plus genotypes have become transfusion independent long term. Importantly also, the last few years, new curative prospects have been opened up with the development of the genome editing technology, providing the exciting prospects of targeted in situ gene correction. The program of the conference is outstanding, and it will cover all aspects of current management in hemoglobin disorders, including latest developments in the field. We are proud to accommodate such a prestigious conference in Thessaloniki that brings together expert scientists and educated patients and parents. I am confident that the 14th International TIF Conference will be a successful and fruitful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Batsis. Our next two presenters, Mrs. Stella Mina, representing the Greek Thalassemia Association, and Mr. Vasilis Dimos, representing the Greek Thalassemia Federation, constitute our hosts, our main actors and key collaborators and invaluable contributors to TIF's work, putting substantial efforts to organize these conferences. TIF is so greatly indebted not only for the professionalism that was shown and with which our collaboration was governed in all these 9 months, but also for the warmth, love, sincerity, and passion with which they have addressed the needs and challenges of this conference, which I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, were truly many and extremely variable. Stella Mina.
Thank you. Distinguished participants, doctors, scientists, and patients from all over the world, I feel very honored as the president of the Greek Thalassaemia Association to welcome you all to the joint 14th International Conference on Thalassaemia and Other Hemoglobinopathies and the 16th TIF Conference for Patients and Parents. It is a great honor that the Thalassaemia International Federation selected our beautiful city of Thessaloniki to host this conference. As it is widely known, Thessaloniki is a city which has always connected people of different cultures, religions, customs, and practices. A multicultural city that this weekend will host and embrace all of you. Through the scientific announcements, this conference will disseminate optimistic messages about the treatment of thalassemia all over the world. What was once the gloomy reality of this disease is now a distant memory at the beginning of the 21st century. The scientific community, through continuous research, has taken important steps to increase life expectancy so that the disease is no longer considered a terminal illness. All the presentations we will hear during the next 2 days are the culmination of a long-term research and hard work of our doctors, to whom we owe a great deal of gratitude. Any treatment regimen will of course be ineffective unless the patient fully adheres to it. At this moment, I would like to make a special reference to a particular group of patients who need our attention and care. I'm referring to the refugees and immigrants suffering from the ongoing warfare in the Middle East region, who have either been forced to leave their homelands or who live under harsh conditions in these war-torn countries. As we speak and attend this conference, there are children of refugees and immigrants who have passed through Greece in order to seek the hope of a more secure life and improved treatment of the disease. In closing, I would like to thank you all for coming to Thessaloniki. I hope that this will be a constructive conference worthy of your expectations, and I recommend that you find some time to also tour this enchanting city during your stay. Thank you.
I would like now to call the President, Mr. Vasilis Dimos, the soul, the heart, the mind of this conference. Thank you.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Κύριε Παπαγεωργίου, αγαπητέ Κώστα, ειλικρινά με τον πρόλογο καταφέρετε και με συγκινήσατε. Θα ξεκινήσω καλωσορίζοντας τους προσφωνώντας, τους εκλεκτούς έτσι προσκεκλημένους και όσους μας τίμησαν με την παρουσία τους. Θα ονοματίσω μόνο τον κύριο Μπόλαρη που μας τιμά από την κυβέρνηση, εκτός από τον κύριο Υπουργό φυσικά, και τον εκπρόσωπο της Μητρόπολης Νεαπόλεως. Δεν θα αναφερθώ στους πόσους ιατρούς, καθηγητές, προέδρους βλέπω αυτή τη στιγμή. Θα ξεχάσω σίγουρα κάποιον και δεν είναι σωστό. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I would like to welcome you to our conference, which is co-organized by the Thalassaemia International Federation and the Greek Thalassaemia Federation. Our federation was founded in 1991 by 26 thalassemia associations. Since then, many years have passed, years full of claims and struggles, successes and failures, years full of difficulties. Thanks to our hard work, our cooperation, our faith, we managed to overcome a lot. Now, let me share with you our course of action, planning, and vision of the future. Thank you. The actions of the Greek Thalassaemia Federation aim to accommodate constantly the needs of the patients and their families, to resolve their everyday problems and to improve the quality of life. Our goal is, apart from surviving, to ensure normality, quality of life and health and better health, so that thalassemia patients don't feel being different. There are a lot of problems, but the life ahead of us is gradually getting longer. Thalassemia is now a manageable disease. We know it, we experience it. That's why we should be vigilant in keeping the existing therapeutic protocols. Thalassemia International Federation, local federations and associations are the means to provide us that is needed for our disease. The interventions of active associations can ensure a better future for all of us. Unity is our strength. Thank you.
Having concluded the message, we now enter the second phase of the opening ceremony, which is now centered around TIF's expression of gratitude and appreciation, on the one hand to the people who have contributed in the organization of these conferences, namely the Greek Thalassaemia Association, the Greek Federation, TIF office staff, and TIF's professional organizing company, and on the other hand, to those who have contributed to the cause of thalassemia on an international basis and to the work of TIF. In this context, I would like to invite Mr. Englesos and the Board of Directors to join me on the stage, please. Mr. Englesos, Bob Figara, Mrs. Tully, Duru, Michelle, Riyad, Mrs. Hashemi, George, Loris, you're all here? So, awards are provided first. We're all here? Μπορεί να χρειαστούν. So, awards are provided first to our Greek collaborators and hosts. The Greek Thalassaemia Association, Mrs. Minar will receive the award, and to the Greek Federation, Mr. Dimos will receive his award. George Costantino will provide with the President the award.
Thank you very much. I would like to dedicate this award to Mr. Vasilis Dimos and all the former board members who since 1975, patients and parents, fight and keep fighting until today for a better access to the healthcare system and for the patients' rights. Thank you.
Mr. Dimos. Θα αφιερώσεις πάλι?
Βεβαίως θα το αφιερώσω. Τη λίστα θα με βοηθήσει. Θα αφιερώσω και εγώ και θα με βοηθήσει η Στέλλα λίγο στη μετάφραση.
I will help with the translation.
Καταρχήν, να σας ευχαριστήσουμε που μας τιμάτε, που μας εμπιστευτήκατε για τη διοργάνωση του συνεδρίου.
Thank you. It is a great honor it is a great honor for the Greek Thalassaemia Federation. So.
Και το βραβείο θέλω να το αφιερώσω στη μητέρα. Στη μητέρα κάθε θαλασσεμικού.
Να το κάνω παραλληλά. We would like to dedicate this award to the mother of every thalassaemic patient.
Η οποία αγωνίστηκε, πίστεψε στη ζωή και τελικά τα καταφέραμε.
The mother who from the very first moment that she held a newborn, a newborn facing a terminal illness, she fought for it. She supported, and she helped it flourish. Thank you.
And now Mr. Inglesos will help with the awards to the staff. Each member of the staff who have worked beyond any salary idea, who have shown their undivided commitment, and we feel extremely privileged for having each one of them with us. Maria Beledier is not here with us. She's left at the office to attend the office work, but her award is here, and I would like Lily to come and receive Maria Beledier's. Dr. Victoria Antoniadou, our educational scientist, next receives her appreciation. Eleni Antoniou, our International Affairs and Policy Officer. And Rawat Mehri, our Administration Officer. There you are. Can you all stand here just for another moment? Last but not least, it is my pleasure, on behalf of the board, the Greek Society and Federation, our collaborators, TIF Headquarters Office, to introduce to you a very special award, a certificate of outstanding contribution and work, which is presented with a lot of love and gratitude to one incredible member of our staff, Mrs. Lily Cannon, here. I haven't finished. Who came to the office as a very young scientist, she still is, 8 years ago, seeking work at TIF. I must admit, and she knows, it was with reluctance and concern that I accepted and considered her employment with TIF. Why? On account of her very, very young age and lack of experience in this type of work that requires a lot more and above than a science degree. It requires passion, love, respect, caring, and collaborative orientation, volunteerism and altruism, above all determination and commitment to the cause and the mission of a federation. This very young then, and still now young, surprised us all in a most positive way. And together, an overall outstanding performance in TIF's work and in this conference, a very well-deserved award, I think, from the President himself.
Dear delegates, dear board members, Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, it is my privilege to serve all of you. You have given me meaning to life that I didn't know existed. I take strength from all of you every single day. Thank you.
So we have more for you. Moving on, please, the board stays with me. We are privileged tonight to honor two long-term and esteemed friends and collaborators of TIF, each one with one of the two established since 1996 TIF awards, the Banos and the Inglesos Awards. So, As per the criteria set back in 1996, the Panos Inglesos Award is awarded to individuals with long-term documented contribution to the welfare of the patients with thalassemia at the country and at the international level. This award could not go anywhere else and was unanimously decided by the board to be given to Mr. Kostas Papageorgiou, an award that the board felt should have been given a long time ago. But where could be a better opportunity for a friend Kostas to be awarded, but here in his own native country, to which he offered passion and exemplary altruism in this field, to receive a very well-deserved award. Mr. Kostas Papageorgiou, please. What about his footballer? Is coming? The pictures. There he is.
This is too much for me. Too much. I have been informed an hour ago that I would be honored with this prize, but my relation to thalassemia is the relation of the soldier. I will be the soldier until the end of my life. Thank you.
The George Inglesos Award has been decided to be given to an individual for his outstanding contribution and support to TIF's work and strategic goals all this year in the international arena. With enthusiasm, unanimous decision of the board, the award is given to Professor Dimitris Lokopoulos. His contribution, I haven't finished. His contribution to the science of hemoglobinopathies, of course, needs no description, as the published medical literature makes no mistakes. It reveals his huge contribution in the science of hemoglobin disorders at the national and international level. Particularly impressive at times of very confined knowledge of the pathophysiology and the complex clinical manifestation of the disease. Professor Lokopoulos has been working with TIF and for TIF for the last 10 years at the international arena as a medical advisor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was another surprise, I must admit. Both Kostas and myself didn't expect this kind of honor. We appreciate that very much. We are grateful to TIF. I think on my side, I did what I had to do. I'm a physician, so I offered my services in the way I could. Thank you very much.
Mr. Christos Pafidis has a very special place in this in the organization of this conference, and I would like Michael Angastiniotis to be here with us. Where is Christos? Ah, there you are. Our PCO, but much more than a PCO. Working day and night, he's been into the spirit of volunteerism and contribution. Thank you, Christos. Now, the third part of the opening ceremony includes the conference's keynote presentations, and the coordination of this session goes to the expert hands of Professor Lokopoulos and Professor Christos Katamis, with a huge and valuable contribution at the national and international level. Professor Katamis and Professor Lokopoulos, the next session is in your hands for the keynote presentations. Thank you very much for the board.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I want to welcome you in the first session of the 14th Thalassaemia Conference for Hemoglobinopathies and Thalassemias. Our first speaker is Professor Porter. He is here?
Professor Porter, yes, just arrived from London.
Okay. He will speak on hemoglobinopathies, care and cure. Have you reached the end? I think everybody knows Professor Porter. He's the professor of hematology and head of the department of the thalassemia units in King's College Hospital. His work is outstanding, especially in the management of thalassemia and chelation. Welcome, John.
There we go. I'd like to thank the organisers for giving me this talk. The title is not mine. Have we reached the end? I think that's quite provocative and interesting, and I've tried to answer this the best I can. And the reason it's a good question is because the rate of change with treatment for hemoglobin disorders has really accelerated in the last 3 or 4 years. The number of new drug products which are coming through for thalassemia and sickle cell disease is almost bewildering. So I'm not going to try and cover those. A lot of those in any detail. A lot of these are going to be covered in the meeting. We're going to go through a lot of the new scientific trials later in the meeting. So what I'm going to do is just give an overview of where we are and where we're getting to. I think that a lot of the advances that have happened have been built on basic scientific understanding of the hemoglobin disorders, and for many years that was not translated, and it's only now that that is being translated. So I think I'm just going to pinpoint some of the key changes that have occurred over the years. I'm going to talk particularly about the chronology of thalassemia treatments, both curative and non-curative. And because the title says hemoglobin disorders, and because when I asked, do you want me to cover sickle, they said yes, I'm giving 2 slides only on the whole of sickle cell disease, which is a challenge. But the most important slide is at the end, or 2 slides, is are we there yet? Are we at the end? So if we think about the evolution of understanding of thalassemia disorders, this goes right back to 1925, the first description by Cooley, but a lot of other descriptions in the Mediterranean by Thalassaemia, Bianco and so on, where the mechanisms of the hereditary basis of thalassemia was described. The structure of hemoglobin was described by Pauling in 1949 and then further work up until 1960. The importance of globin chain imbalance to ineffective erythropoiesis and the pathophysiology of thalassemia disorders was highlighted by the work of Weatherall and Clegg, but has been carried through by many investigators. And because I'm not going to mention this later, the advances in genetic mutations and its impact on prenatal diagnosis has been really important from around 1980 all the way through to the present time. When it comes to the management of thalassemia disorders, I think our experience in the UK shines a light on that evolution. If you go back to 1960, there was just transfusion and people were dying very young from iron overload. Intramuscular Desflower was first introduced by a nice study from the Royal Free with Bernadette Medell and others. And then subcutaneous treatment came in 1980, both in the United States, in Boston and in London. In this chronology, bone marrow transplantation was introduced by Lucarelli, and the basis for defining different categories of risk were determined. Deferapone came in London around 1987, or possibly a little earlier. Very importantly, cardiac magnetic resonance imaging, or T2-STAR, was introduced around 1999 in London. This had a major impact on how we manage patients, and has allowed the stratification of risk and intervention with our patients. And then finally, in this chronology, Defer-Silence came in around 2007, and it's had a big impact on the options available with respect to treating our patients. Now, before this evolution, cardiac death was the major problem, cardiomyopathy or arrhythmias. But since this time, the survival has gradually improved throughout the world. So here are some survival figures from the UK, showing the overall survival in the UK in the top left. In the top right, the overall survival in our patients at UCLH, where we introduced intravenous Desvrel through Portacast very early. We were able to rescue a lot of patients, even though they were already in heart failure. And you can see the Italian data is very similar, very strict cohort effect. That is to say, the earlier you were born, the less likely you were to survive to the age of 20 or 30. And that has a lot to do with the age of introduction of chelation therapy. So if you see this scheme that was put together by Bernadette Medel, you can see in the 50s to early 60s, patients were dying of anemia. They weren't getting enough blood. Then blood, that's the pink. Then blood began to be introduced, and people started to die from the effects of iron overload. And this persisted right the way through until about 2000, 2003. And then we had, by this time, we had at least 2 chelators, and we also had the CMR, which I mentioned, the way of measuring iron both in the liver and the heart. And you can see that in the cohort of our patients who have been followed since around 1999, that the cause of death has changed very significantly. So now patients, the death rate's gone down very substantially, that's the important thing, and people are tending to die from liver complications, hepatitis C, malignancy, or infection. We must remember that throughout all this time, infection has been the second commonest cause of death, and we need to do more to tackle the high risk of infection in these patients. So if you look at the mortality rates in our centre, it's very substantially less than the historical mortality rate. So that's a success. Are we there yet? Cardiac iron overload has gone down, so if you take mild cardiac iron overload, a T2-STAR between 10 and 20 milliseconds, that has dropped very substantially. And the severe cardiac iron overload, which means that you've got a very high risk of going into heart failure in the next year, has fallen from about 25% to 7%. So a very substantial reduction in heart iron and in mortality over this period of time. This is the age distribution in London at the UCLH and the Whittington hospitals, and it shows two things. There's a peak. The most common age group now is around 30 to 35. There's a big fall-off under the age of 30. Why is that? Well, that is not because the younger patients are dying, because they're not being born. So we have antenatal screening, we have prenatal screening, antenatal advice, and the birth rate with thalassaemia major in southern England particularly has dropped substantially. We have hardly any births now. This is in contrast to some parts of the world. Secondly, you can see when patients were born. So here we have patients born in 1985 or in 1975. So if you were born in 1975, the chances are you may have received chelation therapy in the first few years of life. But if you were born before that time, then you didn't get your first chelation until you were 10 years, 15 years of age or so. Many patients died. Or those who didn't die have got a lot of comorbidities from the effects of iron overload. So this is why the age of exposure to chelation therapy is so important. So that's the story with transfusion and chelation. It can be very successful if it's monitored properly and it's given in a timely way. But there's a lot of interest in other treatments, and there are a lot of new novel therapies around. I'm not going to review the trials in any detail, but they aim to do a number of things. But if you're trying to think about how they might coalesce, they're trying to decrease ineffective red cell production, which is the hallmark of thalassemia. And this can be achieved by promoting fetal hemoglobin, or alternatively by antagonizing hepcidin. There's a study on JAK2 inhibitors which shows that you can shrink the spleen. And then there's the activin receptor traps, ACE11 and ACE356. A couple of slides, this is going to be shown in more detail later. This is from data shown by Antonio Piga at the EHA meeting. You see the hemoglobin in non-transfused patients increases by up to 2 grams, and it's quite a reliable increase in hemoglobin. And this works by acting as an activin receptor trap and possibly inhibiting GGF11 signaling. The absolute mechanism isn't entirely clear. And if you look at the same drug in transfused patients, the amount of blood that patients get can be very substantially decreased. So if this could be combined with transfusion and chelation, we could decrease the demand for blood and decrease the demand for our chelation. So if this translates in the long-term studies, this could have a major impact on how we manage our patients. That is non-curative therapy. I have to mention curative therapy, hematopoietic stem cell transplant and gene therapy. The hematopoietic stem cell transplantation was first done by Thomas in 1982, and the major studies were done by Lucarelli and co-workers in Pesaro, who established the risk factors, class 1 to 3, which are still used today. And I'm not going to go through that in detail, but the point of this next slide is to show that mortality from hematopoietic stem cell transplantation from a sibling has dropped substantially during that period, from around 37% in this particular study to 27%. So it's becoming a safer procedure, and as a result of this, it's now recommended by many groups in Europe, for example, for young children before they become severely iron overload who have a matched related sibling. And I think that bone marrow transplantation, particularly from MUD types and haploidentical, is going to be expanded, although this must be regarded as experimental to a large degree at the moment. With gene therapy, the objective is to transfer the beta globin into stem cells and reduce the alpha-beta imbalance, increase the normal red cells and reduce ineffective erythropoiesis, and ultimately become transfusion independent. That has been the long-term objective. Gene therapy has been around since the 1980s with the initial programs, but it wasn't successful in mouse models, and early studies with retroviral vectors were disappointing. With the revival, by using lentiviral vectors, there was a revival in interest, and now we have a successful demonstration of gene therapy in patients using lentiviral vectors. So this is the famous patient with E-beta thalassemia who received myeloablative busulfan conditioning followed by lentiviral vector to correct the hemoglobin. This patient is now around 8 years out and has stable hemoglobin and is transfusion independent and has no significant side effects. This study is now being expanded by Bluebird Bio into larger studies, and we're involved in one of those at our centre. And there are early results of that which are going to be presented at the American Society of Haematology. But essentially, the production technique and the vector copy number is becoming more and more efficient, and so obtaining higher hemoglobins is very likely. So what is the future outlook for thalassemias? We have non-curative, improved iron overload and improved use of chelators. I haven't talked in any detail about that. I think Ali Tahir is talking about that tomorrow. Improved safety and provision of blood. I've not talked about that today. We need safe blood, and there's going to be a satellite symposium on that tomorrow. Improving dyserythropoiesis, well, the activin receptor traps do that to some extent, but there's many other approaches such as hepcidin agonists which are very promising, particularly in mouse models. In terms of curative, we've spoken about gene therapy with lentiviral vectors, but there's at least 4 groups worldwide working on this, and the idea of CRISPR technology is appealing, although it's very early days with that. That might have some advantages over the lentiviral approach. And improve safety and scope of allogeneic transplantation. Okay, just to be fair, even though there aren't not many sickle doctors in the room, I will just say a few words about sickle cell disease. What's interesting about sickle cell disease is, although it was the first molecular disease that was discovered, its translation into effective treatment has lagged behind that of thalassemia. So whereas transfusion and chelation has been a massive success in thalassemia, we haven't really had that speed of massive increase in the quality of life and survival in the sickle patients. It's not to say there haven't been successes. So it was the first molecular disease that was discovered, its inheritance was discovered, its structural basis was discovered. The importance of fetal hemoglobin in leading to a more benign disease was identified way back in 1972. And I think an important bit of work, which is now bearing fruit, was the work of Hebel, who showed the importance of the adhesion, the stickiness of red cells and white cells to the endothelium and to the severity of sickle disorders. So in terms of managing sickle cell disease, what are the important milestones? Prophylactic penicillin, major impact. Transfusion for severely affected patients with stroke, major impact. But we didn't have really good control data until the STOP studies in 1994, and then more recently the study for silent infarcts, which has yielded some fantastic data on the benefits of transfusion. Stem cell transplantations, a lot of really good data now. I'm not going to go through that. Then, of course, hydroxyurea, hydroxycarbamide. This has had a big impact on the frequency of vaso-occlusive crisis and chest syndrome. The extent to which it reduces stroke is controversial, and it's not a perfect drug. I think we need better drugs, and so that can be argued. Newborn screening, we have universal screening in the UK for sickle cell disease, and that's been very successful. And now we have the first case of gene therapy for sickle cell disease, which was published earlier this year by Rebbe, using a similar technique to that used for thalassemia by Bluebird Bio. So, have we reached the end? No, I've nearly reached the end of my talk. Not yet, because prevention of births is still highly variable between different regions of the world, different countries, and even between regions within countries. Diagnostics are not universally available. You go to some countries, they say they've got T2 star, but it's called a T2 star, but it's not a T2 star. It's a big problem. Non-curative treatment is not available in many countries. Some countries still don't have safe blood and affordable chelation. So we've really got to work on that. Curative treatment by stem cell therapy, needs to be affordable, as does gene therapy. So we're very much in the early phases of gene therapy. It's incredibly expensive. How are we going to be able to roll that out worldwide? Curative therapy is very attractive, but we have to make it affordable. We also need the infrastructure in many countries to support chronic disease. Even in the UK, there are many parts of the country where we just don't have the doctors, we don't have the nurses, we don't have the support to get the best outcome. And one of the roles of TIF, I think, is to help people to maintain and get a good group of people together to get the best outcome. So science and technology are ahead of the organisation and funding of healthcare systems, and this is a real problem worldwide, not just for thalassemia. So, have we reached the end? I apologise for quoting a former Prime Minister from the United Kingdom, who, when asked after one of the first successful battles in the Second World War, we're nearly there yet. He said, this is not the end. I think it's very appropriate for thalassemia. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. Perhaps we're at the end of the beginning. Thank you.
Of comprehensive presentation on hemoglobinopathies, cure and care. Actually, discussion will be postponed for the rest of the session.
Well, so far we have heard about the new advances, which are superb and were well presented in concise manner by Professor Porter. Now, this session contains two other issues of major importance. These are not very scientific, but they are very important. The one refers to the huge problem which appeared with the forced migration of refugees from places, from countries where the thalassemia incidence is very high. And this created a huge problem in European countries, and it will continue, and we have to find ways to face it. This question will be addressed by Stefan Lobit, who is a pediatrician who now residing in Cologne, in Germany, a German pediatrician, well trained in the Universitäts Charité in Berlin, and has worked also in the University College in the hemoglobinopathy section. He will talk to us about the problem of thalassemic forced migrants. Stefan.
Thanks a lot for the kind introduction. Yes, you are completely right. This is not scientific, but it's really, really important what I'm going to talk about. First, my disclosures. Well, before I start, I'd like to give you some definitions. The Oxford Dictionary says migration is the movement of people to a new area or country in order to find work or better living conditions. So we have different reasons to migrate to another countries, and today I will put a focus on forced migration. I will put a focus on refugees who are on the run. This is our challenge, and although I'm going to focus on the Middle East crisis today, we definitely have many other problems or hotspots in the world, also affecting patients from countries where hemoglobinopathies are very common, like currently in Bangladesh with the Rohingya refugees. And you can see in the middle, the Berlin Tempelhof Airport is the biggest refugee camp in Europe. It hosts 3,500 refugees. But you can see the other numbers, like in Kenya, 250,000 refugees, or 80,000 refugees in Jordan. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, there are currently 22.5 million people in the world on the run. Of the 17.2 million people who are under the UNHCR mandate, 55% are from Syria, Afghanistan, and South Sudan. And importantly, it's not the rich countries, you can see this in the lower right corner, not the rich countries who are hosting the majority of the refugees. The top 6 are Turkey, Pakistan, Lebanon, Iran, Uganda, and Ethiopia. This is Mohammed. Mohammed is just a single patient, but his case is very sufficient to explain all the problems that we have in the countries where hemoglobinopathies are not so common, but where we have a lot of refugees. When I first met him, he was 12 years old. He was from Syria, suffered from beta thalassemia intermedia. In Syria, he received transfusions occasionally, and when the war began, to reduce the transfusion burden, he was splenectomized. A couple of months later, he developed a stroke, and since then he is dependent on a wheelchair. So, Mohammed has several anti-erythrocyte antibodies, alloantibodies, autoantibodies, that make him very difficult to transfuse, in particular in case of an emergency. He came with very prominent physical stigmata of thalassemia, severe iron overload because he never received any escalation, and he was colonized with a multi-drug resistant pneumonia. He and his father fled from Aleppo in the summer of 2015, leaving back the mother and 2 siblings. The father carried Mohammed from Aleppo to Athens on his back, where they bought a wheelchair on a flea market. Then they used the Balkan route to illegally enter Germany, and they took all the risk of this tour. It took them 6 weeks. And when Mohammed was under medical treatment, we tried to reunify his family, but this proved to be extremely difficult. So another category of problems, psychosocial problems. At that time, the mean waiting time for an appointment at the responsible German embassy in Beirut was 14 months. So this was the time his family had to wait until they could apply to follow the family to Germany, or Mohammed and his father to Germany. So what the family did was to try something different, and they lost $10,000 when they were trying to buy an earlier appointment. They also lost the whole family of the father's best friend when they tried to come to Europe legally over the Mediterranean Sea. I've chosen Mohammed's case because he had all the main problems of refugees just united in one single person. From the medical point of view, we had a severe phenotype that we were not used to in Germany. We have not many patients, but most of them are much better. He was severely iron overloaded, suffered several other sequelae of the disease, had allo and autoantibodies, and was colonized with a multi-resistant organism. There were also significant psychosocial issues. He was severely traumatized. So every consultation was a very big and time-consuming event. And cases like Mohammed's made our hematology services in Germany nearly collapse. That's okay. So this is an overview of the top eight countries under the aspect of applications for asylum in 2016. The German population has increased by about 2 million people in the last 5 years, and all these 2 million are refugees. However, as I told you at the beginning of the talk, the other countries like Turkey or Lebanon even accepted more refugees. Lebanon has a population of 6 million, and 1.5 million of these 6 million are refugees. Our main problem is in Middle and Northern Europe, that we are not prepared to this situation. We have very powerful healthcare systems with very well-trained doctors, but they are not prepared for thalassemia or sickle cell disease. Many hospitals don't have the resources to transfuse as many patients as necessary. And last but not least, the individual cases are much, much more complex than the cases we are used to. As there's not much literature available on this topic, I conducted a survey. Many of you were very helpful for this survey. Tiff was very supportive and in person of Michael Langastine-Yotis. And so we asked a couple of, or a lot of centers in Europe what happened, and 51 responded to our survey from 15 different countries. The first question was, how many patients do you care for? And you can see the number is really significant: 6,979 sickle cell disease patients, 4,469 thalassemia patients. And these data were not estimates. 70% of them were taken from registries or local databases. 28 centers of 50 reported an increase in the number of patients. Surprisingly, 19 did not, but we will come back to that later. There's a system behind it. Here you can see the number of, or the centers who reported an increase and those who didn't. And you can see that there's a tendency towards the Balkan route, where the centers observed an increase in the patient number. We asked if there is more detailed data available from 2011 year per year, sickle cell versus thalassemia, but obviously this question was too time consuming. Nevertheless, 7.79 of 51 centers answered. 7.9 sounds a little strange, but this is because some centers answered for 1 year, but not for the other. In the mean, 7.79 centers answered, and these centers reported an increase of 107 sickle cell disease patients and 312 thalassemia patients. So this is a significant number of increase per center, taking in mind that we are talking about centers who were caring for 5, 6, 7 patients before the crisis. So where do the refugees come from? 15 centers reported Syria, 1 Arab countries, 8 said Sub-Saharan, 2 Albania, 1 Middle Asia, and 1, this is really interesting, this was a center from England, reported Spain. But the number was 5. But you can see Syria is the dominant country in all the countries among the Balkan route. And if you take the Mediterranean, the Western Mediterranean and Central Mediterranean routes, we are more talking about African patients and more talking about sickle cell than thalassemia. We asked if the migrants, or what kind of treatment the migrants received in their countries of origin. 90% of centers said transfusions, 56% chelation. So one half of the patients did not receive chelation before. Hydroxycarbamide for sickle cell disease was only available in 1/4 of the patients, or in the countries of 1/4 of the patients. But surprisingly, 40% reported a regular monitoring, but this may be because we did not specify what we meant with regular monitoring, if it was just ferritin or liver iron or heart iron or whatever. 90% of centers report problems with the language. This is a very obvious problem, but it's, from my personal experience, really a big problem, because if you cannot communicate with the patient, it's difficult, and the healthcare system cannot pay for a translator for every visit. The patient can't pay for a translator for every visit. So this is really a big problem in educating patients. You can see in the second position, there's a poor understanding of the disease. And in the third position, the sequel of non-state-of-the-art care. So you should educate the patients, but you are not able to do it. The problem of colonization with multi-resistant bacteria or infectious diseases that many healthcare providers put in one of the first positions. They're always very careful with these patients. It's not so important than we thought. And this, I think this is true from my personal experience. Do the refugees receive the same standard of care like your native patients? This was very good. Yeah, 68% said yes, they do. So although there are a lot of problems, the refugees receive a very good treatment in their hosting countries. And who pays for that? Usually it's some kind of public or national health care service. The kind of organization is a little different, but usually the countries pay for that. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's in Germany, it's working some way or the other. It's getting better, but there's no real concept behind it, and I know that it is the same in many other countries. So one really big task for us and for this conference is to give this whole thing a concept and a structure behind it, because this problem will persist for a couple, maybe many years, and we need to be prepared for it. Lastly, I would like to thank all respondents to the survey, and in particular Michael Angastiniotis, who supported the survey very well. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Stefan. It's a major problem, and we thank you very much for having presented it in a clear way. I think that if there are comments, we shall leave them up to the end. So we shall go to the third speaker now. The value of the associations you have heard, and there is no doubt about that. The associations have played a critical role in promoting the improvement of the thalassemia care and and other issues. On the other hand, sometimes they need legal support, they need political interactions and so on. And there is a need to combine all those properties. I think the third speaker, who is Mrs. Anuba Taneja Mukherjee, has all these properties and will tell us about the advocacy of the group she's directing in India. Anuba is a lawyer by profession, and she is the member secretary of the Thalassaemia Patients Advocacy Group in India. So she has a personal experience about thalassemia, and she is one of the most active persons in the field. So we shall be happy to listen to her.
Thank you. A very good evening to all of you. Namaste from India. And I think it's only at TIFF that doctors and lawyers can share the mic. And thankfully, my title is not in the form of a question. Had it been a question, the answer would have been yes. Patients as equal partners in decision making is indeed the global reality. I have divided my presentation in two parts, actually three parts. One is the concept of decision making. Who are the decision makers and how do they make these decisions? What is your role in it and how can you really go about it? What is the strategy that you should adopt? And who all have done it before? Okay, so don't get scared. There's nothing legal about it, and this is looking like a class in political science. But all I'm trying to tell you here is that typically in most developed countries and developing countries where there is democracy, the constitution of that country really empowers the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary to make these decisions. While the legislature does this by enacting what you call laws, the executive, which is really comprising the bureaucrats, they implement these laws or decisions. Sometimes they also make laws which you call policies, rules, regulations, but at the end of the day, they are also an implementation of the law that the legislature is making. And then you have judiciary. The judges see to it that the laws which are enacted by the legislature are implemented by the executive. But I don't know whether you know this, judges also make laws, and these laws are called precedents. And I will give you some examples towards the end of the presentation, how some thalassemia patients have really fought for their rights, and they have approached the judiciary for these laws. Now, decision making. What exactly is decision making? When you're talking about thalassemia, probably you were expecting that I would just talk about whether you can decide how much blood you want on a particular day. Last evening, I was attending a meeting where the patients were vehemently insisting that I know when I need blood, and you won't tell me that now my HB is 10.5 and I do not need it. I need it. So that decision making is also at the end of the day coming from the legislature or the executive or the judiciary. So in most countries, decision making is essentially a very consultative process that involves multiple stakeholders, including governments, citizens, affected parties, civil society, academia, think tanks, research bodies, and media. Why? Why, when the constitution of the country is bestowing the legislature and the judiciary and the executive, they are bestowing these rights on these three authorities, then why does it have to be a consultative process? Because neither the judges nor the elected representatives of people like you and me, nor the bureaucrats sitting in the government know everything about everything. So when you talk about thalassemia, a guy who has a degree in anthropology and who's sitting as a bureaucrat in the Ministry of Health would not know what to do. Therefore, even when you need a policy on thalassemia, you have to be consulted. The government will consult you. The government will consult the medical fraternity. The government will consult media in the way that, yes, when media picks up our stories, and I will show you how they do that, that's when the executive can decide that, yes, today I need to make a policy or I need to make a law on something like thalassemia. So what is your role in all this? Actually, I should have added there, it's not only your role, it's not only your fundamental right as a human being, it is also your duty. Because who, if not you? You know your business best. The decision makers need to hear from you because, as I just said, they do not know anything about thalassemia. And today, when they are talking about, for instance, and this might be a little controversial, if the US is talking about repealing the orphan drug credit tax, they don't know about these rare diseases as much as you do. And therefore, a patient organization like National Organization for Rare Diseases in the US, they get together to tell the government what a rare disease is all about and how you cannot repeal an orphan drug tax credit. So that's where you know your business the best. Also, this is particularly true for India, but also for the world over. Any government decision or any law is made on the mantra, which is basically the philosophy of greater good of the greater number. So if the government does not see you in this great a number in the room that they are using for policy making, they think you are small enough, and they can take that benefit from you and give it to a diabetic or a patient of cancer, not saying that they don't deserve it, but you deserve it too. So if you are not greater in number, there is no great good for you. And it is tried and tested. I'll show you how. Now, this is the popular strategy that patient advocacy organizations and patients who really want to get involved in decision making adopt. Either they directly reach out to the government in meetings, consultations, events like these, and they create surround sound. They approach media, and I'll show you this strategy in action also. The strategy is pretty simple. You have to unite, engage, and partner. Unite, you have to identify in your respective countries those faces and those people who are interested in pushing the cause of thalassemia at a global, if not global, at a national level. Then you have to identify the messages. And this is the difficult task. Because if you say that you want NAT testing, are you sure everybody in this group also wants NAT testing? So you have to agree on what are your focus areas. Then you have to engage the government, as I said, through events, through meetings, through representations. Like I just said, the National Organization for Rare Diseases sent out a representation telling the government that they can't possibly roll out the tax credit. And then partner. Now, this is very important because the government is not working only for the votes and for the cause of thalassemia, and they are working for the greater good of the greater number. So what is in it for them? So when I say partner, what I mean is that whatever you propose, whether it's NAT testing, whether it's prevention of thalassemia, you must be in a position to explain to the government what is in it for the country. Is it going to take the economic burden off the country? So for instance, if there is a drug tomorrow which reduces the volume of blood a patient requires, then would you be able to explain to the government that by making that treatment affordable, you're actually taking a burden off the government by reducing the requirement of blood volumes? These are some of the tactics. Don't get intimidated by this title because tactics is usually used in the area of communication as deliverables and methods. So what are some of the methods through which we can approach the government, engage with the government or policymakers? Meetings, consultations, representations. I'll tell you that recently, Huntington disease patient advocacy group from all over the globe, the EU, America, Canada, they recently released a white paper on how patients should have a voice in clinical trials. And a voice doesn't mean that they should just be trial participants, but they should be partners. They should be heard, and their perspectives should be recorded and reflected upon. Now, has anyone done this? Yes, of course. Not only people related to thalassemia, but of course I would like to mention that TIFF has made a terrific start in the form of expert patients program, because to engage knowledge is the start. If the policymaker feels that you do not know enough about thalassemia, and here I would like to add that when patients generally go to a policymaker to say that, hey, you reduce tax on desvoxamine, it's usually a very emotional appeal to which the government seldom responds. So knowledge has to be the basis of your engagement with any policymaker, whether it's judiciary, whether it's executive or legislature. So the general objective of this educational initiative is to develop the knowledge of patients with thalassemia in order to give them the skills, confidence, and motivation to take meaningful decisions and play a key role as partners in healthcare decision-making that concerns their own health, but also in a wider context of national health policy decision-making. You may like to check out the website of TIFF, and they have some terrific modules out there, some terrific presentations that will help you to enhance your knowledge on thalassemia. And with this knowledge, you can go out there and engage with the policymakers and tell them what you want. Others have done it, yes, of course. As I just said, AMD patient advocacy groups helped Angiogenesis Foundation release white paper. I just talked about the NORD, how they have the orphan drug tax credit. I just spoke about global Huntington's disease, how they have just gone about raising the concerns of patients that they should be a voice in clinical trials. And recently, 3 US bleeding disorder patient organizations received funding support for patients' rights advocacy campaigns. And believe me, this support was given by a major corporate. So you can consider going to corporates. I won't name any corporate, but you can go to these corporates and say that you want to run these advocacy campaigns, and they might just help you. Last few slides on the India story. I'm very proud to share that just about 3 months back in India, under the umbrella of Thalassaemics India, which is our NGO running for about 30 years for the cause of thalassemia, we launched Thalassemia Patients Advocacy Group, and the PAG was launched by the Deputy Chief Minister of the national capital of our country. It is a group that comprises professionals from law, IT, psychology, education. I'm one of them. I work as the member secretary of this group, and we have taken it upon ourselves to focus on these areas and go to the government, the policymaker, the hospitals, whoever is seized with the matter for availability of safe blood, daycare center with the required transfusion facilities, chelation, investigations, management and treatment of associated complications, treatment in general, and prevention in general. Now, in the span of 3 months only, this is some distance traveled. We have been working with the Health Minister of Delhi for prevention, management, and treatment of thalassemia in Delhi. We have engaged with the government on the Disability Act and thalassemia's position in it. And now this is interesting. Now I will go back to the slide where I was mentioning that judges also make law. So in 2016, India passed its Disability Act, where India included thalassemia in the list of 21 disabilities under the Disability Act. But when one of my friends wanted a seat in a medical school, and she went to the medical school, she was told that, sorry, we do not interpret the act like that, and you do not fall under the benchmark disability. And that's when she went to the court, and believe me, it's okay to go to the court. She went to the court, and she filed a public interest litigation, and she got an order from the Apex Court of India to say that thalassemia is indeed a benchmark disability, and this girl got immediate admission into the medical school. After that, the Medical Council of India started working on the guidelines for thalassemia and how they should be treated under the Disability Act. So these are some of the things that you can possibly do in your country as well if you're not doing so already. So we have approached the Health Secretary for contributing towards the National Thalassemia Policy. You'll be pleased to know that India is already thinking about National Thalassemia Policy, and it was somewhat disconcerting that the government didn't think it fit to invite the patients to be a part of this consultation, and they invited only doctors, which is when Thalassemia Patients Advocacy Group wrote to the National Thalassemia Policy Group, and we have written to them to be invited to this because this is our business, and we are the best to know about this. So we have already made focused representations on the need for NAT testing in India, plans to rope in major corporates. This should also, when I say patient engagement and patients' partnership in decision making, I think corporates have a large role to play. So in your countries and your associations, you may also like to factor this. We have engaged with the premier think tank of the government for research and study on thalassemia, which has been in principle accepted, and we'll be talking about to them. Established the Friends of Thalassemia group. So we have a group called Thalassemics, Friends of Thalassemia group, and these are people who are not thalassemics, who are not probably parents of thalassemics, but they are the people who are in the know of the law of the land, or who just know things which will work best for us. And I would like to end this by using some words from my favorite poet, Khalil Gibran. I would walk with all those who walk. I would not stand still to watch the procession go by. And because I have some time, so I will say a few more words and then I will stop standing between you and cocktail. You will never be 100% ready to change. Don't wait for the perfect time. It will never come. Start today. This is the beginning of everything you want. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. You are the ideal thalassemia lawyer. We need you.
Well, let us start with discussion. First of all, Professor Porter, are there any questions to Professor Porter? Presentation?
Can I just have your attention? In the last part of the opening ceremony, Just Steve would like to announce the publication of two important books, two additional books, and one position paper. The first is the long-awaited for many of us here, the short guide for the management of transfusion-dependent thalassemia, which is based on the long text of the third edition. And the other is the updating of the management of non-transfusion-dependent thalassemia. TIF is greatly indebted, in addition to the editors of the third edition and the second updated edition of the guidelines, to Professor Ali Taher and Professor Maria Domenica Gabellini, and to Dr. Khaled Musalem, President of the International Hematology Network. Last but not least, it's my great pleasure also to express TIF's gratitude and appreciation to Professor Tina Bolidi, who has worked with TIF for the preparation and publication of a position paper on the blood safety, a key tool for TIF supporting its work at the level of the national and international decision-making bodies. They will all be available at TIF's booth and, of course, on request. Needless to say that, as with all the publications, this will also be translated in various languages. Now, I would like, ending, to ask the faculty members and the chairpersons of tomorrow to respect as much as possible the timekeeping. These conferences have certain innovations. One of them is that we are given only 15 minutes for each presentation. There is no specific timing for lunch and coffee breaks. Coffee breaks will be available outside. This is some important housekeeping information, but you need to know. Coffee breaks and lunches will be served at the time shown on your program, but there will be no time, there will be no stopping of the lectures so that you can have your lunch and timing. So innovation is very strict timekeeping, ladies and gentlemen. Coffees and lunches. There will be live transmission in this room. This room will be for the patients' meeting. So we have arranged to have for the patients live transmission of the key scientific sessions that will be taking place in the doctors' conference lecture theater. So the patients will stay here. They will have live transmission here, and they will hear everything about the topics of common interest. I think I've said it all. But it's not. So I think these are the important housekeeping information. We are always available for any request. Please respect the national legislation in the exhibition area. Patients wearing red lanyards are not allowed to enter the medical exhibition area. This is not disrespect nor discrimination. It is a respect and adherence to national, European, and international laws, and I do seek your support and collaboration in this. Thank you very much for your patience. A cocktail is for you outside, and we look forward to a very interesting and empowering conference.